Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I am Michael Harris, Chairman of the Shelby County Democratic Party, and you are watching Coffee, Candidates, and Conversation. This is the place where you'll get to hear a one-on-one conversation with candidates about real issues, and we'll learn more about why candidates are running for office and their perspective on the issues that matter to us. And so, voters, this is food for thought. So we want you to dig in, get your knife, fork, and spoon ready, and get your notepad, and let's make some notes about what we're learning from different candidates. Watch every episode. Take some time to invest in the future of America, the future of Tennessee, and the future of Shelby County and Memphis by learning about the candidates that we'll vote for. Our guest for today is a very special guest. His name is James Mackler, and he is running to represent the state of Tennessee in the United States Senate. James Mackler, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Man, we are excited to learn more about you. We've received a lot of calls from concerned voters who wanted to get a chance to hear from our candidates who are running for U.S. Senate, and so we decided to do all that we could to try and make this happen. And with that, let's just kind of dive right in. I know you're busy and you have a lot going on, so I'm just going to dive in. James Mackler, tell us something about you that we cannot Google, that we can't find on your website, and that we would not know by working with you in your professional capacity.
Wow, got to be careful not to disclose too much here. I certainly, if you Google me, you're going to find out that I left my law practice to fly Black Hawk helicopters in Iraq. But what you're not going to find out is what inspired me specifically to want to fly helicopters when I joined the Army, because I wasn't already a pilot. Learning to fly a Black Hawk helicopter as a 30-year-old lawyer was not easy. I had to get an age waiver just to go do that. And it gave me real appreciation for how hard it can be to learn a new skill when workers are either voluntarily or involuntarily forced to go find some new job to pick up and do something different, whether it's because of outsourcing or automation. And it gives me a real passion to make sure that Washington is helping to make training and retraining programs a priority. But I digress. Back to the helicopter. Before I was in the Army, I was a lawyer in Fort Collins, Colorado. And I worked for a volunteer search and rescue team, a mountain rescue team that included Rocky Mountain National Park as part of our jurisdiction. And these are back in the days of pagers. So I was a lawyer, carried around a pager, and at any given moment, usually at night in a snowstorm though, that pager would go off and we'd find out that there was a lost hiker or a stranded climber in the park. And that happened a lot, especially during the summer. And one rainy afternoon, I got a page to rescue an injured hiker. Because of the weather, the rescue helicopters couldn't fly in to get this hiker, and he was at the very top of Long's Peak. So we got our whole team assembled, all of our gear, and made this long hike to the top of Long's Peak, a 14,000-foot peak with all of our gear. It took us all night. We got there just as dawn was beginning to break. We found the patient, we packaged them up, we put them on the litter, and got ready to carry them back down. And just as we were going to carry them back down, the clouds broke, and this helicopter came in and landed, and it got all the glory, took the patient back down to base. It had taken us hours to do what that helicopter did in 20 minutes. And I was, needless to say, I was intrigued. So when it came time for me to join the Army, I thought about what could I do that would allow me to do what that pilot had done. And so I asked to go to the Army and fly helicopters. And I'll give you a bonus, something else that you won't find out about me on Google. I have a tattoo that is Leonardo da Vinci's original conception of a helicopter from 1493. Really? And not too many folks know that about me either.
Okay, nice. Yeah. I'm pretty sure everybody appreciates the bonus. Okay, yeah, that is nice. I think they had a version of that in, I know it's gonna probably be funny, but in the movie Mr. Peabody and Sherman. It's a kids movie, and in that movie, Sherman is flying the first version of the helicopter, which is the design that Leonardo da Vinci put together. They went back in time through the Wayback Machine.
Very cool. Well, all of your listeners who don't know about it now are going to have to Google Leonardo da Vinci helicopter 1493,
Yes.
and they'll see what it looks like.
Okay. Then before we go any further, I've got my coffee. It's in my SEVP mug. Are you drinking on the beverage over there?
I do. I've got my coffee. I don't know if y'all can see that.
Oh yeah. Okay. Okay. 4 reasons I love being daddy. Okay.
Yep.
Nice.
Got my wife and my girls and our new
Mhm.
puppy, Dapper.
Nice. Nice. Nice.
Yep.
Well, oftentimes when we think of candidates, we as voters, we're basically looking for where that candidate stands on things that concern us. And what we often forget is that candidates and elected officials alike are also voters. So at this point, I'd like for you to take that candidate's hat off for a moment and then just talk to us as a voter. What for you is the most important issue of the day?
My wife is a rabbi here in Nashville. I don't know if all of your listeners, your viewers know that. We've got two little girls. They're 9 and 10 years old. We want to raise our children in a country governed by courage, not by fear. In a place where a hard day's work earns a living wage, where access to healthcare is a right, where access to women's healthcare is a right, and where public education is a pathway to opportunity. A place where we're all free to live and love and speak and pray as we choose. We've got a lot of work to do to get there. We're in a crisis, and that's why I stepped forward to run. We need more servant leadership in Washington. That means we need to elect people who will work every day to solve problems for the real issues affecting Tennessee families, not someone who's going to go on Fox News every day to work on building their brand, because we already have that in Senator Marsha Blackburn. And although she's not on the ballot this year, my opponents have pledged to be her exact clone. In this election, we have a choice between me, an Iraq war vet who's stepping up to serve his country stepping up to serve his country again, having volunteered after 9/11, and someone who's pledging to be a clone for Marsha Blackburn, a rubber stamp for an agenda that's hurting Tennessee.
Okay. And so I heard you talk about healthcare, and in particular, focus healthcare for women. And so let's sort of unpack the healthcare issue. We know that in America there are a lot of issues connecting, relating to healthcare. And I'll just throw up this scenario on the screen. When we look at healthcare access for the middle class versus access for the poor and elderly, what do you think about that situation in America? And based on what's on the table now, do you see anything as a workable solution to meet to balance that scale?
Fixing our healthcare system is the number one issue in this race, and it'll be my first priority in the Senate. Our state leads the nation in closed rural hospitals per person. I actually launched my campaign in front of a closed rural hospital in McKenzie, and since that time, 3 more rural hospitals have closed. The opioid epidemic is ravaging all of our communities. There's no national solution. Folks aren't even talking about that anymore. And access to healthcare and healthcare outcomes are so different depending on who you are and where you live in Tennessee. There's some concrete steps we have to take. We have to reduce the cost of prescription drugs. There is no reason why the federal government should be prohibited from negotiating drug prices with pharmaceutical companies. We've got to stop our rural hospitals from closing, and that means expanding Medicaid. We have to stabilize the exchanges and bring down costs. Lamar Alexander, who of course is leaving the Senate now, had a bipartisan bill with Patty Murray that would have stabilized the exchanges and brought down costs. It never even got a vote in Mitch McConnell's Senate. And I look forward to bringing that bill back up when I get to the Senate. And we have to continue protecting people with pre-existing conditions. Tennesseans, let me put it this way, there are 2.7 million Tennesseans with pre-existing conditions. They will all lose their health care if the lawsuit that this administration has taken all the way to the Supreme Court is successful. And Bill Hagerty supports that lawsuit. It is wrong, especially in a pandemic. Tennesseans need a senator who's going to work to fix the Affordable Care Act, not work to take it away.
Okay, well, I'd like to talk about something that you mentioned when you were just speaking. You talked about healthcare and healthcare for women and just generally speaking. So let's talk about it. Healthcare access for the middle class versus access for the poor and elderly in America. What are your thoughts on the state of healthcare, and do you see any workable solutions?
Fixing our healthcare system will be my top priority, and it is the number one issue in this Senate race. Our state leads the nation in closed rural hospitals per person. I launched my campaign in front of a closed rural hospital in McKenzie, and since that time, 3 more rural hospitals have closed. The opioid epidemic is ravaging our communities. There's no national solution. Folks aren't even talking about that. And access to healthcare and healthcare outcomes are so different depending on who you are or where you live in Tennessee. And there's some concrete steps we can take. We have to reduce the cost of prescription drugs. There is no reason that the government should be prohibited from negotiating lower drug prices with pharmaceutical companies. We've got to stop our rural hospitals from closing, and that means expanding Medicaid. We have to stabilize the insurance exchanges and bring down costs. Lamar Alexander had a bipartisan bill with Patty Murray that would have done exactly that. Mitch McConnell never gave it a vote, and I look forward to bringing it back up when I get to the U.S. Senate. And we have to keep protecting people with pre-existing conditions. 2.7 million Tennesseans have pre-existing conditions, and they will all lose their coverage if the lawsuit that this administration has taken all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court is successful. That lawsuit is supported by Bill Hagerty. It is wrong for Tennessee, especially in a pandemic. Tennesseans need a senator who's going to work to fix the Affordable Care Act, not someone who's going to take it away.
Got you. It makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Well, let's sort of transition then, and let's talk about another situation that we have brewing in America, and I like what you're talking about as it relates to healthcare access and ways to attack the issue. But what about education? And the idea that Donald Trump and Betsy DeVos believe that we should decrease federal funding for schools that go all virtual.
Public education should be the best pathway to opportunity. I went to public school. My mom taught public school for 40 years. We need to pay teachers like the professionals that they are and give them the resources they need and the respect they deserve. In the Senate, I'll make sure public schools get exactly what they need to serve their students, and I will stand up to any proposals that would take resources away from our public schools. You mentioned Betsy DeVos. Right now, we have a Secretary of Education at the federal level who does not believe in the mission of public education. And we have Bill Hagerty to thank for Betsy DeVos. Bill Hagerty led the Trump transition team in 2017. He's responsible for Betsy DeVos and so many other cabinet members who are looking out for themselves rather than the people they're supposed to serve.
Okay. And I guess sort of with that piece on education, what do you think about digital equity in an environment where we have a global pandemic that is forcing us to stay inside until we can get it under control? What about digital equity in places in rural communities that don't have access to broadband, and even in urban communities that may be even inner city, but people don't have access to internet?
More than 1 million Tennesseans live in internet deserts without access to high-speed internet. And there is common ground to fix both our digital and our physical infrastructure. But we're not going to do it when people like Mitch McConnell continue to send much needed funds that Tennessee needs to his biggest bankrollers. Digital infrastructure should be treated just like other forms of essential infrastructure, like electricity, for example. Every single Tennessean must have access to high quality, high speed internet, because as you pointed out, there's a digital education divide, but that also means that people can't work from home. It means they can't receive telemedicine from home also. We're all important, but COVID-19 has created a perfect storm around those issues, and people want change.
Okay. Well, so we're about 4 or 5 questions in now, and I have to sort of ask this question because it's one that's on everybody's mind, and it is certainly one that I think kind of connects to all of these issues, because when we talk about healthcare, it's about the affordability of healthcare. Even when we talk about, when we think of children staying home and learning through a virtual platform, we're talking about the cost of access to broadband. We're talking about the changing dynamics for parents who still have to work and have to figure out what to do with little children. So what then is a livable wage in America?
Well, let's start with this. When Bill Hagerty led ECD, he made Tennessee the state most dependent on minimum wage jobs. In other words, the state with the most minimum wage jobs per person. That is no way to support Tennessee families. A hard day's work should earn a living wage, and folks should not have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to get by. Now, a living wage might look different in different communities, but sticking with the same $7.25 an hour that was set a decade ago and hasn't moved a penny, that certainly isn't enough. $15 an hour is $31,000 a year before taxes. I do support that, and I know what we really need to do is create good, high-paying jobs. We cannot accept a system where people are trapped in minimum wage jobs, and that is exactly what happens when they're stuck working at 2 or 3 jobs. There's no time left in the day or the week for anything else. There's no time left for family, certainly no time left for an education or for finding a better job. We're facing the most serious economic meltdown we've ever seen, and the last thing we need to do is give someone like Bill Hagerty another opportunity to hurt American workers.
Okay. Well, at this point, we're going to take a brief pause for the calls, and we'll have a short commercial for you to watch and give you some critical information that we all need to know and respond to. And then we'll come back and we'll start our lightning round. And we will run through a lot of issues and hear what James Mackler has to say about them. So again, I'm Michael Harris, chairman of the Shelby County Democratic Party, and you are watching Coffee, Candidates, and Conversation with our very special guest, James Mackler, who is running to represent Tennessee in the United States Senate. We'll see you when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Michael Harris, chairman of the Shelby County Democratic Party, and I'm here with our very special guest, Mr. James Mackler, candidate for United States Senate, seeking to represent us here, in Washington for the state of Tennessee. And so we're glad to have him on our show. And it's time to go a little deeper in our lightning round. And so our lightning round, we'll talk about a lot of topics. We'll put an issue on the screen, and you'll have about 1.5 minutes to respond to that issue. And if you need to go a little longer or you want to dig deeper on an issue, we'll be glad to do it, because we want voters to have every opportunity to hear what you really have to say about these issues. But other than that, though, we'll dig in, and then we'll make it through our list and get to our big question at the end. Fair enough?
Fair enough. Looking forward to it.
All righty. Let's see. Question number 1 will be: rate America's response to COVID-19 on a scale from 1 to 10, and then tell us why you rated it that way and what you would do better.
Well, you're asking for a rating on a scale of 1 to 10. There are other numbers more immediately on my mind. We've lost more than 1,000 Tennesseans, and now 150,000 Americans. Over 50 million Americans have lost their job. The White House has downplayed the threat of this virus, has ignored experts time and time again in its response. The response has been chaotic and politicized. True leaders put the health and safety of those that they seek to serve ahead of their own political gain. Bill Hagerty and Manny Sethi are holding large in-person events all across the state without masks, putting their own political gain ahead of the health and safety of Tennesseans. And Bill Hagerty is fundraising off of his position on the White House COVID task force. His position on that task force should be a sacred duty to Tennesseans, and instead he is directly raising money, taking tens of thousands of dollars of corporate PAC contributions from the individuals on the task force and offering insider information in exchange for campaign contributions from his biggest donors. In the Army, I learned that good leaders hope for the best and prepare for the worst. We failed to prepare for this threat, and we've lost our friends and neighbors as a result. Going forward, we need to wear masks. We need to do so much better on testing. We need to have a plan in place for contact tracing, and we need to have folks who are feeling bad self-quarantine.
Okay. Well, I think this kind of connected to COVID-19 has certainly affected what's going on in this next category, our economy. So let's talk about economic growth in Tennessee, especially in light of COVID-19.
You know, we need to rebuild the middle class. A hard day's work should earn a living wage. There's an important role for the federal government to play here, investing in things that create good paying jobs now and in the future. Things like infrastructure, education, and clean energy. Something that's near and dear to me that would also help so much in this moment is more incentives for service. And by that, I mean much more than military service, but service more broadly to our country so that young people can get involved in their communities, meet and work with folks they might not otherwise meet, and help them pay for college. Tennesseans that work hard and play by the rules and do their best ought to be able to achieve the American dream. We have a lot of work to do.
Okay. All right. We're making some progress. Let's talk about supporting small local businesses throughout Tennessee.
Having started a small business and helped others grow, I know that entrepreneurs are not going to be drawn to communities without skilled workers, without modern infrastructure, without available medical services. So the federal government has a role to play in supporting those businesses and supporting communities to attract new businesses, investing in 21st century infrastructure, as we talked about earlier, bringing broadband to all of rural Tennessee. We also need real tax reform, not gifts to the wealthiest individuals and the biggest corporations, real tax reform targeted to incentivize entrepreneurship, especially in underserved communities.
Okay. Well, let's talk about those reforms. When it comes to reforms, there's always an effort to balance the power or gain power as relates to both our House and our Senate. But currently we have 53 Republicans, we have 45 Democrats, and we have 2 independents. So let's just say, let's assume arguendo that James Mackler changes the count. And so now we have 46 Democrats, 52 Republicans, and let's just assume we still have 2 independents. How do you get things done?
When we came under fire in Iraq, we weren't Democrats or Republicans. We were Americans working to accomplish a mission. Senators have a mission too, to serve all of America. I will take that mindset with me to Washington. And true leaders hold themselves and others accountable for the benefit of the people they're supposed to serve. When I was a young Army lawyer, a captain, I often had to tell commanders who greatly outranked me, a colonel or a general, sir, ma'am, you can't do that, or you can't do that way. And it takes a degree of courage and integrity and honesty to speak truth to someone who has that degree of power. But that's what's required of a JAG, and that's what's required of a U.S. Senator, that honesty and courage, willingness to speak truth to power, and I'll bring that with me to Washington as well.
Okay. Let's go to a fun one. Legalization of cannabis. It's created an industry that has generated billions of dollars across America, and Tennessee hasn't gotten on board with that as of yet. What are your thoughts about the legalization of cannabis, and I guess to even focus that further, the access to the opportunity to those who aren't already millionaires and 100 millionaires and
Legalizing medical marijuana is long overdue. And if states want to legalize marijuana, as so many have already, the federal government needs to get out of the way.
And what about what's your position on people who are now serving prison sentences for nonviolent crimes, particularly relating to marijuana?
Well, you've addressed 2 things. We need comprehensive criminal justice reform. Our criminal justice system has been very much broken. Like so many other things in our country, it is plagued by systemic racism. When we talk about legalization of marijuana or about nonviolent drug offenses, look at uh, the criminal justice system for a second and look at the lengths that the president has gone through to defend and to help his own friends, people like Michael Flynn, a man who pled guilty to treason, to colluding with our adversaries. The president has been advocating for Michael Flynn in the federal criminal justice system. Compare that with the experience of my clients, people often facing long mandatory minimums and harsh sentencing guidelines for nonviolent offenses. I was their only voice in the courtroom. We desperately need real criminal justice reform. Now, the president's First Step Act was a good first step. I can think about one of my clients whose mandatory minimum went from over 35 years to under 10 years. That's the difference between never knowing his grandchildren and watching them grow up. But we still have a lot of work to do.
Okay. Well, you kind of opened up the box a little bit there. Let's talk about what's going on in America as relates to social justice, civil rights, and race relations in America generally. You talked a little bit about police reform, and we know, of course, in light of what happened with George Floyd, and it being captured on camera for the world to see, and of course has sort of help advance the Black Lives Matter movement and bring a lot of attention to critical issues relating to race. What are your thoughts on where the low-hanging fruit is and the opportunity for America to make a leap forward, or at least a step forward now?
Right now, this moment, we must stop murdering Black Americans. There's a lot of work to do to start addressing how systemic racism impacts every other aspect of our society. And it does, in health outcomes, economic outcomes, education outcomes, every single aspect of our communities and our societies. We talked about the disparities in criminal justice, the lengths that the president will go through for Michael Flynn, while I'm the only voice for my clients caught up in our criminal justice system. And while the First Step Act was a good first step, there's so much more we need to do on policing and on criminal justice. The president's executive order on policing, it doesn't go nearly far enough. We need real reforms codified into law. That's why I support the Justice in Policing Act, brought forward by the Congressional Black Caucus and passed by the House with bipartisan support. We cannot let that bill, get stuck on Mitch McConnell's desk of inaction like so many other important pieces of legislation. We have a lot of work to do to heal the wounds that have been here for a long time, and it starts the moment that Black Americans stop being murdered.
Well, let's talk about this. This is something that has been attention has been brought to this by several concerned voters that want to know what our candidates think about the restoration of voting rights for ex-felons, and in connection with that, should felons have their voting rights taken away in the first place? Or should you have your voting rights taken away because you committed a crime in the first place?
America is a country of second chances. People who have paid their debt to society, they should have their rights restored. There may be exceptions. I'm happy to have conversations about those things, but our criminal justice system needs to be about delivering justice to victims and getting offenders back on the road to being productive members of society. And our society works best, our democracy works best when people can vote, participate, and have their voices heard.
Okay. Well, what about this? Second Amendment, right to bear arms versus the need for gun control in America.
We can never accept gun violence as an ordinary part of American life. I'm a military veteran and I'm a gun owner. I know that we can protect the Second Amendment and keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people, domestic abusers, the dangerously mentally ill, people on the terrorism watch list. I am laser focused on a solution, a common sense bipartisan solution that 86% of Tennesseans support, which is expanding background checks to all gun sales so that we can do something about gun violence.
Okay. And you mentioned it, and so I'm going to bring this up. Military spending. How much is enough?
The Department of Defense budget, it needs to be equipped to address modern security threats, and should undergo regular audits, and there needs to be accountability to ensure our money is being spent wisely. Anyone who spent time in the military has seen the incredible fraud, waste, and abuse that occurs throughout the military and does not enhance our national security. Clearly, we need the resources to fight and win the nation's wars, and those resources need to be used wisely. And this is a chance for me to tell a story that I tell in person a lot. It's going to be hard to tell on Zoom, but I think it makes the point. When I got to my unit and we were getting ready to deploy to Iraq, we were reaching the end of our fiscal year. And in the military, what that means is if you don't spend all of your end of year fiscal money, you don't get as much fiscal year money the next year. So there's a real incentive, and it's a perverse incentive, to spend as much money as possible. So the supply sergeant walked around our office handing out very, very expensive Benchmade knives and said, "Hey, I just had to use up the rest of our money. I want to give you a knife. Take a knife. Take 2 knives." So actually, I have this pocket knife that I actually still have with me. I carry it around with me. It's a very, very expensive knife that I'm glad to have. I got to Iraq, and it was time to be issued my sidearm, my 9mm pistol, and they were out of weapons, out of guns. So I showed up literally to a gunfight with a knife because we failed to properly allocate our resources. That should never happen, and it's just a bit of a concrete example of the way money can be mismanaged in the military. We need to get a handle on that. It's a matter of spending our money wisely.
Okay. Well, let's talk and sort of transition. The world is changing rapidly. We went from children going to school in public to now many public school systems having to figure out how to offer instruction virtually through online platforms. So how do we then crack down on cybercrime, which is bound to rise in light of this increased online presence for the world?
One of my jobs with the National Guard has to do with assessing and dealing with cyber threats. And cybersecurity, of course, has always been an important issue for us in the military through our ongoing training about how to deal with cyber threats. Like so many other issues that we face on the global stage, when we fail to lead, other countries that don't share our values fill that vacuum. And we're seeing, increased threats from countries like China and Russia, and our allies don't know whether we will stand by their side as we fight our common enemies. We have got to bring all of our resources to this fight, working closely with our allies. And in particular, we've got to strengthen and secure our elections. Our democracy only works when we can vote, when our voices are heard, and when our elections are secure. And at every level of government, we need leaders who are going to acknowledge that threat and then work to counter it.
Okay. Well, let's talk about this. And I've talked to several Democrats who are really concerned about the stability of this program, the security of Social Security. What do you see as the best way to ensure that Social Security is available for generations and generations to come?
Social Security and Medicare are promises that we have to keep. In the Senate, I will oppose any legislation that cuts funding for either of those important programs. COVID-19 has made it more clear than ever that Tennesseans cannot afford another senator who's in favor of giving trillion-dollar tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans at the expense of Social Security and Medicare. Bill Hagerty has pledged to be a rubber stamp for a president who's proposed cuts to those programs in every single one of his budgets.
Okay. And in terms of are you familiar with I believe it's if you make $138,000 a year, then your FICA deduction would be the equivalent of someone who made $1 billion a year. What do you think about Social Security contribution at the level of your income and the possibility of making that change to our laws?
I think that Social Security and Medicare are promises that we need to keep. And I'm going to oppose any legislation that cuts any funding for either of those benefits. We do need real tax reform, but it cannot be made at the expense of Social Security and Medicare.
And I'm stepping out of. I'm going to cut this out. What I want to get at there is, and I probably could have framed it better. So the FICA status, if you make $138,000, you pay the same FICA deduction. You have the same amount of money deducted from your pay for FICA as it would be even if you made $1 billion.
Right. So it stops at that $135,000 level.
Okay,
Yeah,
it's 135. Okay.
no, you might be right. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
The, I see your point,
Mhm.
and I understand your question. I'm not sure where we make those adjustments. I mean, that's going to require much more detailed analysis than
Mhm.
I think I'm prepared to make. I'm certainly willing to work with, and I can answer this on on camera too. What we need to do is listen to the experts and follow the data to make sure Social Security and Medicare remain solvent. And if that requires changing income caps, then that's what we should do.
Okay. And so I think I'm going to just re-ask that follow-up
Sure.
to go into it. Okay. Okay. Well, one concern that has been expressed is the amount of the FICA deduction and the difference, the scalability of it. So if you make, between 130 and $140,000 a year, then the amount that you would have deducted as a FICA deduction would be essentially the same amount, even if your check was to sit next to somebody who earned $1 billion in a year. So, what do you think about scaling the FICA deduction up based on income instead of capping it?
Well, to reiterate first, I don't support cutting benefits or raising the retirement age, and I'll never support privatization. Right now, folks pay into Social Security on the first $137,700 they make. Every dollar earned above that level doesn't include contributions into Social Security. We can add decades to the lifespan of Social Security by eliminating that cap for the very highest income earners.
Okay. Okay. Well, do you have any plans to try and propose some new legislation in some way or another that could make it through and change or improve uh, any systems that we have? Any plans to try and push new legislation through?
I do. Since the Citizens United decision, we can't even start having conversations on important issues that affect all of us because of the role of money in politics. Whether we're talking about the cost of healthcare, the cost of prescription drugs, gun violence, climate change, you name it. There is too much money invested in maintaining the status quo. When I get to the US Senate, I'll pass legislation to increase transparency so we know who's funding our politicians. And I know that change starts with me. That's why I'm not taking any corporate PAC money. I'm so proud to have grassroots donors in all 95 counties investing in my campaign, investing in better leadership in Washington, because I'm running to serve all Tennesseans, people, not corporations and not special interests.
Okay. And I think that's definitely important to our voters to make sure that we don't have candidates who are bought and paid for uh, seeking office. And so I'm glad that you brought that up. So let me ask this question, and I think I heard the answer to it earlier, but I have to ask: would you support a federal minimum wage increase?
I would. I believe that the minimum wage, 7.25 an hour, hasn't changed in over a decade, is far too low. $15 an hour, which is $31,000 a year, is something I would support. And my focus is really on creating good, high paying jobs now and into the future. I'll make sure that I'm working with businesses that employ Tennesseans to create those good jobs, not doing what Bill Haggerty does, which is to go to them to fund his campaign.
Mm, okay. Um, so now it's time for us to get that big question I was telling you about, and it's a question that we ask all the candidates who come uh, to this show. And the question is, well, it's not more. I guess it's more of an assignment that we're going to give you and ask you to do on the spot, and that is to perform a SWOT analysis of the state of Tennessee. Put your hat on as a senator, and tell us what you think, what you perceive to be our greatest strength in Tennessee, our greatest weakness, and then for our opportunities, that one's hard to just lock down one. So no more than three, but our top three opportunities, and then what do you see as our biggest threat, or perhaps maybe the top three things that are the greatest threats to us moving from where we are today to where we can be tomorrow.
My campaign is and always has been about traveling the state and listening to what folks need and aren't getting from Washington. And that leads me to our biggest strength, which is that Tennesseans are hardworking and industrious people. And if given the chance, will make better lives for their families. The weakness is the flip side of that. We are being held back by some of the worst policies coming out of Washington. Now, that creates an opportunity. We need to fix healthcare, we need to grow our economy, and we need to make public education the pathway to opportunity that it should be. The threat, electing another senator more focused on sound bites than serving Tennesseans.
All right, so you heard it. James Mackler has made the case, and he has given us his SWOT analysis. He's talked about the issues we discussed in our lightning round, and he really gave us some insight into who he is and why he wants to run and represent, well, why he's running and why he wants to represent the state of Tennessee in the U.S. Senate. So before we give him an opportunity to close us out, I want to share some information with you. And so first, if you'd like to find out more about James Mackler, you go to www.jamesmackler.com. On his website, you can gain access to his Facebook handle and check him out on Facebook, his Instagram handle, check him out on Instagram, his Twitter handle, do the same, check him out on Twitter. And we'll give him an opportunity to come back and talk to us and give his final pitch, tell the voters why he deserves their vote and why he would be the best choice. And before we do that, I want to share just something really quick with you guys. Everyone can make a difference, and one vote can be the difference. Our greatest power, it becomes manifest when we as a unit, as a collective body, go to the polls and exercise our right to vote. But it's not just our right to vote, it's our responsibility. It's the birthplace of accountability and leadership. It is the place where we make statements that cannot be ignored and cannot be denied. So raise your voice and go vote. That's why we're producing this series. We want you to have access to the information that will empower you when you go to the polls, because fighting for change only makes sense when we elect leaders who will go and champion those values and stand up for the type of change that we're asking for and seeking. So that's what it's all about. And with that being said, I'll now return the floor to Mr. James Mackler. So you can close us out and tell the voters why they should be voting for James Mackler on August 6th.
Michael, thanks for that message. And thank you again for having me for this discussion. There is too much at stake to lose sight of what we're fighting for in this election. On issue after issue, Washington is failing Tennessee. Our hospitals are closing. Opioids aren't being addressed. And the trade war hurts our economy more than any other state. Add in COVID-19, and you can see there is a perfect storm gathering across Tennessee. People want change, and we can win this open U.S. Senate seat if we seize the initiative. I got in this race early because there's a lot of work to do to get 6 more points. Governor Bredesen got 44% when he ran. My campaign is, and always has been, about meeting Tennesseans where they are and learning what they need and are not getting from Washington. I'm so honored that leaders like Karen Camper have heard my message and endorsed me as the best person to flip this open U.S. Senate seat. And I'm so proud that individual grassroots donors from all 95 counties have heard my message and personally invested in sending me to Washington and to get better leadership in Washington. The Tennessee AFL-CIO and the Firefighters Union have joined our team. I'm a different kind of candidate, an outsider, a veteran, a man of faith. My track record of service appeals to voters all across the state of Tennessee. What we need to do is keep building the team and raising the money to make sure that story is told. So go to jamesmackler.com, sign up to volunteer, talk about the race on social media, and donate what you can. I'm asking all of you, if you haven't already, to vote for me on August 6th and again in November. We will win this open U.S. Senate seat when everyone wanting change joins our team to make it happen. Again, thank you, and thank you so much, Michael.
Glad to have you. You're very welcome. Thank you for being our guest today on Coffee Candidates and Conversation, and we look forward to seeing more great things from you, Mr. James Mackler, candidate for U.S. Senate.